Today's Perspective segment has a definite cultural flavour. African art still makes up a very small portion of the international market, and there's been long been a tendency to view African sculptors and painters as just outsiders. But in recent years, museums and buyers have been taking a greater interest. One woman who's been pushing hard for the arts and culture to be put firmly in the spotlight is Marie-Cécile Zinsou, who set up the Foundation Zinsou in Benin back in 2005. She joins me here now live in the studio. Thank you for being with us here on France 24. First of all, talk us through how your foundation was set up and what its goals are.
Well, I set up the foundation in 2005. I arrived in Benin. I was working with children, and I wanted to show them the contemporary creation of the continent. I looked around me, and there was an exhibition in London, there was an exhibition in Düsseldorf, there was an exhibition in Tokyo. Nothing in Cotonou, nothing in Douala, nothing in Abidjan. So that's how it started. The emergency of having exhibition space in Africa, showing the creation in Africa. And we opened the doors, and then the children across the streets just came to see what it was, and then they told their friends and their cousin, and then 10 years later, 5 million person later, we had done, I don't know, 30 exhibitions, presented artists from all over the continent, and we started the adventure like this.
You, from what I understand, grew up in France with a little bit of time also spent in the UK, but then you, at a certain age, decided to pack your bags and move to your somewhat native Benin. What made you move from Europe to Africa? What was it about Benin that really attracted you?
Well, I was born in France from a Beninese and French family, and we were not allowed in Benin for political reason, and because my great uncle had been president and there was a coup. So when I was 20, I wanted to go back to my origins, because I've heard about Benin since I heard about Benin since I was born, and I wanted to connect and go back home. So I took the plane and went back home, and I stayed there.
But it is, compared to other African countries, a very small pocket of land, but it is nevertheless rich in arts and culture.
Well, culturally, it's one of the richest countries, and it's a fascinating country because it wrote its history. So we're not depending on French colonization storytelling. We wrote our history. We have bas-relief. We have the versified poems of our history. We wrote our history. So today we can look at our stories through our eyes. So it's very important, and so that makes us very, very rich culturally.
You've also been working really hard to try and get African art repatriated to its rightful home from galleries in former colonial powers.
Yeah, I think it's very important today. When you're in Africa, it depends on the country, but some countries have nothing left of their heritage. And so Benin is not exactly in that case, but Benin is the first country to officially ask to France to give back what has been stolen during the colonization. I think it's very, very important. As a French child, I've been confronted to the objects, to the work of arts when I was small at the Man Museum and then at the Museum of the Quai Branly. As a Beninese adult, I can't see my own heritage in my own country. It's impossible because everything is in Paris, in New York, in London, in Berlin. So today, yeah, I think it's a very important fight to ask the previous colonial states to send back what has been stolen.
Now, the contemporary art scene, we have to say, in Africa has exploded in recent years. I have one example here. One auction house in Nigeria has seen its lots increase 10-fold in value in the past 10 years. How do you explain this rise in popularity in African art?
Well, Africa has been knowing one of the most important growths of humanity history recently, and it's going on. So obviously the art market is in the same trend. And today, one of the problems of the colonization is that even today, when you look at Africa from Europe, you look from up to down. This is one of the problems. And today something is changing. You can't deny excellence to Africa. You can't deny that Africa is an incredible creation, that we have contemporary artists that are shown everywhere in the world. And so the art market is changing because the eye is changing, and Africa can look at itself and be proud now.
But some might say that Africa has so many other problems to deal with, poverty, war, persecution, that government shouldn't focus on arts funding. What do you say to those kind of critics?
I think that culture is not a luxury, culture is a right. So every children who grows up, if you're here today, that means you probably read a book when you were a child or even an adult. You probably went to school with no fight. You just had your school offered to you. And I mean, why would it be okay for you and why would it be a problem in Africa? Today, African children, Beninese children, they need, like any other children, they need museums, they need theaters, they need books, they need literature. And, you know, it's like that's how you grow. And today we're in a globalized world. And when you come from Tokyo, when you come from Cotonou, you'll be asked the same. So we can't give you such different beginning package. You need to have the same access to your culture, and so you can have priorities, but culture is the biggest priority of the continent today.
Okay, Marie-Cécile Zinsou, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for being our perspective guest today. Thank you very much. You're watching live from Paris. These are the latest headlines this hour. A huge victory for the LGBT community in India. The Supreme Court in New Delhi has just struck down a colonial-era ban on gay sex in a landmark ruling. A set of resistance fighters are at work to undermine Donald Trump's efforts at the White House, so says one anonymous official in an op-ed piece in the New York Times. An enraged President Trump has called on the paper to hand over the writer. And after months of speculation, British officials say there's a definite Russian link to the Salisbury spy poisoning. The European arrest warrant has now been issued for 2 men wanted in connection to the attack, with the government set to share its evidence with the UN Security Council a little later this Thursday.